Welcome back to the Dallas Duo podcast. Today's guest is Alix Williams, a licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of ARW Counseling, a virtual private practice serving women throughout Texas.
She specializes in helping high-achieving women navigate anxiety, the pressure to maintain a perfect exterior, and the identity shifts that come with major life transitions, especially motherhood. Using EMDR and nervous system-focused tools, Alix helps her clients quiet their inner critic and rebuild their self-esteem. She's here today to talk about attachment, identity, and why so many women are struggling in silence. Alix, welcome.
Thank you. So excited to meet with y'all.
Well, tell us a little bit about ARW Counseling. It's a virtual solo private practice. What does that mean for how you work with clients, and who is the woman you most often see walking through your virtual door?
I created ARW Counseling really to create accessibility so that high achieving women didn't feel like they had to add something to their plate of adding that commute, sitting in a waiting room. I wanted to create that space for them to get to have that safe space from their own environment. And really who that woman that I see walk through my door is that person who always looks like they're fine, that are just holding it together, but really are exhausted in a way that they can't explain. The woman who has that gap of how they really are and how they're really feeling versus like what's seen to the world.
I think that really speaks to so many of our listeners is efficiency. The podcast listener really is someone who's efficient. They're trying to do things in an easier way. And I think not until you're a mom, do you realize how hard it is to actually get to the doctor, make the appointment, pay for the parking garage, sit in the waiting room, get to the door. The amount of time it takes to actually get help is sometimes the hardest part. So I think virtual is such an empowering tool, especially in the mental health space.
I think allowing people to do things, really adding that convenience to them, I think can be so supportive. Because you're right. I think about you being a mom, it's okay, you're timing naps and you're timing foods, you're timing everyone else's schedule and everybody else around you. And you're trying to just hold it together. And sometimes you just don't have the time to hold it together to drive even the 5 minutes or to think about getting in the car and getting your kids somewhere and planning all of that. And so just to give people that accessibility is really what I wanted to be able to do.
What drew you to this specific population? Was there a moment in your training or your own life that pointed you toward this type of work?
I would say a bit of both. I think personally, there's that piece of being a woman. Society tells you to present in a certain way. And so for a long time I have, and I think there's still times that I do where you just act like everything's fine, put other people's needs above your own and just kind of keep pushing through. I think too, with the work that I've done in residential care for teenage girls with eating disorders to what I see in private practice, I think I just continue to see that pushing through the people pleasing, just that silent struggle of having to present that you're okay or that you're fine. And then just having this different internal experience that you're not really giving that attention to. And so they just kind of sit stuck within themselves and you feel lonely and isolated and question yourself. You can even gaslight yourself and just tell yourself well, no, no one else is feeling that way, or you shouldn't feel that way. You're fine. Just keep going. They can feel that way, but you can't.
Oh, I love a good shit on yourself moment. I have a lot of this in my own practice, a patient shitting on themselves when it comes to food stuff, which you understand because of eating disorders. But you talk about using EMDR and nervous system focused tools. And I think this is the place where we try to put things into layman's terms and really explain in plain language. What does that actually mean? And how does it help these types of women?
A lot of the time people talk about how anxiety and trauma live in your mind. It also lives within your body. So talk therapy is great. I love it. I'm a therapist. I will talk about it till the day I die. But sometimes it could be understandable that people still can talk through it and understand it, but they feel stuck because their nervous system hasn't really caught up to it or gotten the memo that everything's okay. And so that's where EMDR can come in. It's where the brain can actually be this natural system for processing difficult experiences. When something's too overwhelming, that memory can be so raw and reactive. And so EMDR can really help to kind of file that away and allow it to just be a memory versus being something that's living so upfront and can make it so difficult to not be reactive to situations. It just is so at the forefront, if that makes sense.
For anyone who doesn't know what EMDR is, can you tell us what that stands for and what a session would look like?
It's eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. There's a whole process that you go through. You have to first create that relationship and get history with the client. I guess I'm going bigger picture. Provide that safe space and create that trust with whoever you're seeing. If you don't have that, you can't get to that reprocessing and desensitization, because what you're having someone do is really work through it in an emotional way and almost like put themselves back into the experience. And so
it's super vulnerable to have to do
that.
It
is. Yes. And so it takes a long time. So you really have to provide that safe space with people first and allow them to feel it and experience and not just know it. I imagine you see this, Whitney, a lot where you have someone come in and they can talk about anything, but to feel the experience, to feel how the food or their experience with food might affect them is a very different experience. And you have to allow people to get there. And then you have to build skills for them to be able to cope with that when they're in session and when they're outside of session. Get all through that. You get into a session where you're going to start reprocessing. That can look like, with me doing it virtually, there's this virtual platform. It essentially has a ball going back and forth, back and forth. And so as you have someone come to something called a target memory, you have them sit with that for a second, and then you start to play the ball that's moving back and forth, and you want their eye movement to go from one corner to the other corner to as far as they can see.
Does it allow you to fully process the memory or fully?
Yes.
I know people talk about EMDR a lot of things being stuck. So it was
Yes.
Does it help it kind of then go fully through the processing in your body?
Yes. So yes, it will allow you to have it fully processed through your body and allow it to go in the directions that it needs to go. EMDR is very self-led. So versus in talk therapy, it might be more so guiding through questions. This is more so after a certain amount of movements back and forth, you will pause them and allow them to take a moment. They take a breath and you just ask them kind of what came up for them. It's very self-led and it's being present with whatever is coming up for them. And that depends on what their experience is. So normally you'll start off with a target memory or experience. And it's usually just you try and have them create a photograph of what that is. A still. And so once that still is created for them, you help them figure out what working through that bilateral stimulation is allowing them to experience that photo and experience everything that comes up with that photo. And that could be walking through the experience of that. It could jump to something totally different. It's just being present with whatever that photo is holding inside of them, emotionally, physically, versus just kind of what's in their head. It's helping them to get very much out of their head and just fully experience whatever that is.
I think as a culture, we talk a lot about clearly that person was really triggered by that. And so what this brings up to me is this might be a solution for situations that people are triggered by, right? If somebody brings up, I don't know, past relationships or abuse or whatever it is, if you've done EMDR on that subject, when it gets brought up in the future, maybe in a public setting, your body feels less than affected by said thing because you've done the work and the work is EMDR. I'm thinking about kind of general lingo around therapy, mixed with this and how it is a solution maybe to some of those things.
Yeah. Well, and it is so interesting that it has to be with someone you've already developed a history with. So the client has to trust you in order for it to be effective.
Yeah. They have to trust you to get to that place. I mean, think about opening up to somebody you don't want to dive deep or be vulnerable or show certain sides of yourself to someone that you don't feel you have that trust or safety with. EMDR has the ability to allow you to work through memories, and I think to the impact that memory can have on your behavior and your experience in your body. So you're not getting as triggered in certain situations, and in situations you didn't even know that it could get triggered, it might not get triggered there. It can help to provide a level of safety in how you're walking throughout the world when something just becomes a memory versus you're holding all this trauma within your body.
Do you think the virtual aspect has really helped patients? Because I feel if I was going through essentially trauma therapy, I would want to be in my favorite super cozy environment. I think sometimes like being in a counselor's office, I've done a lot of therapy. It's just kind of uncomfortable sometimes. Like you're on a couch, you don't really feel that comfortable, where like if I could be like in my own room or like on my bed in my own space, that might actually like help impact my outcomes.
Yeah, I've seen it be really helpful for people to be in their own space. Having their blanket is almost like a security blanket, or being in somewhere that feels like comfortable and known to them versus coming into an office where they might be afraid they see someone they know and they have like some hard stuff they want to talk about, or are sitting in a couch that isn't their own that like feels comfortable for them, or they don't have the sensory experiences that they might be needing to help just kind of regulate a little bit. Not to say that it's not. I've done in-person therapy and I love it. But for where I'm at in my practice right now, it just has been really helpful for my clients and I to be virtual.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about attachment styles and life transitions. You describe major life transitions like marriage, a move, having a baby as sort of a stress test for relationship dynamics. What does that mean, and why do these moments expose things that were always there?
I think these really big transitions that you're talking about, I see them as stress tests because they're high levels of change. So everything that you thought you've worked through, the homeostasis that you've been in just gets rocked. And so kind of everything that you knew, everything you thought you outgrew just really gets brought to the surface. And really what you have to lean on is your partner in those situations, or trying to reground in some way and find a new homeostasis. I think people really struggle to go through change and feeling like there's nothing that you can grab onto during those really big changes. I think brings out what I call people's like default settings, going back to where they were, how they were feeling, their coping skills, behaviors before they had gone through those different transitions.
Andrea and I both have been through quite a few transitions now in our marriages. And I think looking back, like I meet people who are newlyweds and I'm like, oh, they think their marriage is strong. And I'm like, just wait, and I'm like, they haven't done 14 transitions in that marriage, right? I think the transitions are actually where like rubber hits the road, right? And you see like, what do we really have? What is this car really made of? Does it have 4-wheel drive? Does it have extra tires in the back? Like how many tools do we actually have on board? Because just because it's new and cute doesn't mean it's reliable, right?
Well, and it can be uncomfortable too. And
yes.
That's kind of where the growth happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's where they're like, oh, I thought I had done all the work. Like I have my morning routine, I have my routine with my partner, I have my routine with my friends, and you get relocated, or you get married, you have a baby, and it's like, wait, now what do we do?
Yeah. Who am I now?
So
yeah.
Like 7 a.m. and your baby's screaming for the 5th time because it's a newborn, and you're like, when do I even take a shower? You get to see like kind of how things really work as things in ways get harder, because the change, that transition, I think is always hard, no matter whether it's good change or hard change. Your foundation gets exposed, the cracks get exposed, and you're like, okay, how do we do this? How do I lean on my partner? How do I lean on myself? How do we like readjust to all of this?
Big transitions like that could be like not necessarily a negative transition. It could be positive, but that impacts family dynamics, relationship dynamics, with your significant other. So yeah, it's all in there.
I know you were saying that attachment is a big piece of this. What does attachment style mean? And like, or what are the different types of attachment styles? How does that play into these transition life periods?
Yeah. So when I think about like what an attachment style is, kind of at its core, it's your nervous system trying to answer this question like, am I safe? Is love safe? Is this safe? So a lot of it's about safety. What we think about as like secure is that person who can communicate their needs, can feel comfortable within themselves and comfortable in the relationships that they have. And then there's what are the insecure attachment styles. One is avoidant, which is that person who sees independence as like their strength and has difficulty getting close to others and feeling intimacy. So it's people who run. That is their instinct in a relationship, is I found my way out. And I'm done, and I'm going to go jump back in the dating pool and like see what happens there. And then there's the anxious attachment who really craves that intimacy, who craves that closeness, but feel like they have to scream to feel heard, scream to feel understood, and they can have difficulty expressing their needs. When you think about it like in dating, I think of the person with the anxious attachment who's texting the partner like 50 times, like, why haven't you texted me in the past hour? Versus the person with an an avoidant attachment style could be like holding out on everything for like the one, which there are those people, but like they hold out, or like they're for years and years and years pine for that like high school partner, and they're like through college and like, oh, like I just am pining over this one person.
How many attachment styles are there?
The most common are going to be the three that I'd said. And then there's a fourth one, which is an anxious avoidant, which is really kind of like a mixture of the two, which we don't see as often, but can definitely come up.
Which ones do you see like most often in your practice? And specifically like in maybe like our niche of women who are kind of those like type A overachievers? Like what's the attachment style that you're like working on improving the most?
I think with a lot of the clients that I see, I see that anxious attachment style. Like my partner's needs are above my own. I know we broke up and I thought about it for months and it was the right reason, like logically to break up, but I like need them back. And I like can't stop thinking about them. I can't stop reaching out to them. They're playing games of like, oh, well, they didn't text me for an hour. So like, I'm going to wait 2 hours just so they, like, it feels like they want to like come back to me. Like there's like almost like the game is to find like that validation and find that security so they can feel safe. But that's
like
really
scorekeeping a little bit.
Yeah, definitely that scorekeeping. I see that a lot with the types of clients that I see. And then when I see couples, I see a lot of that, like, it's like that rat race of that like anxious and avoidant, or one partner's anxious and the other's avoidant. And they're just like the anxious is chasing the avoidant around and navigating kind of how do we come together so that both of the dysregulated partners can kind of co-regulate and find safety within each other.
So you do couples therapy as well. Would you say that's the bulk of what you do, or is it mostly individual?
I mostly see individuals, but I've done a lot of couples and family work kind of throughout my practice, but more so individuals are going to be coming in to, I guess I say my office, my virtual office. Yeah.
If someone's going through a big transition right now and feeling disconnected from their partner or from themselves, what's the first thing that you'd want them to know?
I'd want them to know that they're not failing because they need more or feel disconnected. I think a lot of with the high achieving population is that if something's happening that feels wrong, it's their fault and they failed somehow. And again, when you're going through big life transitions or maybe just kind of feel stuck, these waves are going to happen and it doesn't mean that you failed. Probably what I would want to tell them.
I think like as a society, like two things came up. I was thinking one, that with the anxious attachment style, that like social media and just the way we live our lives like drives this so much. Like I just got back from vacation and my husband was like, how's your day going? I'm like, I am so behind. I'm like, the pace that I live my life is so unnatural for like my nervous system norm. Like where my nervous system is happy is definitely not the way that like society drives our pace. And I think about like social media and everything just being like so instant all the time that just drives so much of that anxiousness, right? Or like the highlight reels that we see of like, even just with dating, you know, like they just started dating, now they're getting married. And like all you see are these like blips all the time. But two, I think like what you're saying of the failure piece, like we are so under equipped to do these big transitions. Like we are not like required to go through like marriage class or parenting class or like parenting teenager class. Like a lot of people, you know, do the work and reach out and get resources, but I feel like we're just so under-resourced that a lot of my clients, which I'm sure you see too, are like, I just don't know how to do this. I'm failing. And I'm like, well, no one ever taught you. So like, why are you a failure? You're just a novice. And like, those things are different.
I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think there's this expectation from what we see on social media that like you're supposed to know what you're doing and you're supposed to feel like it. I think the amount of times I've had a client come in and they're like, I'm an adult, but like, what do I do? I'm a parent. What do I do? And I'm like, you're not supposed, there's no roadmap to being a specific type of adult, a specific type of parent. There's, I guess, certain baselines of ideally like you want to pay your bills and like keep yourself safe and fed and breathing and that like a child if you have a child. But there's no roadmap to like how to live life and how to experience it. There's, just highlight reels of what you're supposed to do. And then you think those are supposed to be your expectations, or you learn for those to be expectations. And I think it is really dysregulating. I think that a lot of people, especially like in these younger generations, that all they know is social media. All they know is like all these highlight reels they're seeing in front of them is like, I have to be looking for the next best thing. I have to be doing this. I have to be dysregulated or like I won't fit in or like I won't be enough because I'm not getting the 100 roses from my 13-year-old boyfriend who doesn't have an income because this 25 or 35-year-old influencer got them from her husband of 10 years.
Well, and I think what comes up when, talking about some of what, what we're just mentioning is you don't have to wait until you're in crisis to go to therapy. You can go to process a life transition before it happens if you know it's coming. For example, like our daughter, when she was about to go off to college, like we went to therapy, not because there was any big issue, but because I was mostly having trouble processing just what that meant and how that was going to shift the family dynamic and all of that. So could you speak to that, like not waiting until you're in crisis to go to therapy?
Yeah, I actually think that's probably one of the biggest myths is that life has to hit the fan. The world has to be burning around. You have to be in crisis to go. I think people experience that because it's like, oh, well, then it's going to be most valuable, or like, then it will be okay to go.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to that like self-gaslighting or that inner critic, that criticism of like, well, no, this isn't enough. Like, you don't deserve to go yet. You don't need
not
this.
bad enough.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, exactly. And so to experience having to go like once to the fan, you've probably had so much pain leading up to getting to that point that deserved that same type of care, or even just going to be in maintenance of, hey, like I've done a lot of this work. I've just known like it's been a little bit more difficult, like at work lately, or like I'm just feeling off and I can't really pinpoint it. Or like our relationship is good, but I know that we're wanting to do these things down the road, kind of like what you were saying with your daughter and going to college. I want to like prepare us to be in the best spot. Or even just, I want someone to talk to. Yeah, sometimes people just want somebody to talk to that's totally separate from their lives, or they have something going on and they just like, I know this is eventually going to hit. I don't know if this will, but I don't feel like I can talk about it with anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that's such a good point in terms of like, we talk a lot about like wise counsel. And I think in a faith setting, I'm like, oh, I have, women around me for wise counsel and different things. But there are certain seasons of life where even though I have a strong and supportive partner, I've been like, hey, I love you, but talking to you about this does not give me tools that I need to move forward. Like, you are actually not the expert in grief, or you're not the expert in this area. And so I think, like you're saying, equipping yourself and having more tools than you currently do, even if life is good, even if you have support, even if you have friends, they're not mental health experts. They may be allies, but they're not like really a resource for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Having a good support system is one thing, but like, seeking a professional
Because I
help.
think that's kind of an excuse sometimes. People are like, oh, well, like I'm close to my family. I have a best friend. I don't need a therapist. And I'm like, your best friend is not your therapist and neither is your family. Like there is also room for counseling within that circle. But I think sometimes that's the thing that holds people back is they're like, well, I'm not alone. Or like, I have a support team. Like, well, yeah, great. And you don't have tried and true tools, like these like scientific basis research, even like EMDR is, like scientifically proven. Like, do you have tools to use with those people to like maybe magnify the outcomes?
Yeah. I think of it too, like you have doctors for your physical health. You go to physical therapy, you see nutritionists. Why can't your mental health also get that same care?
Yeah.
Of having like, yeah. And that's something that's totally possible. Again, you can get to a maintenance stage in therapy where you're going once a month or you're doing like quarterly check-ins and things like that, just to have that kind of support. And it could be like you didn't know you needed it. And then like 3 weeks later, like, oh my gosh, this is coming at the perfect time. Like something just came up, or just even having nothing and they're checking in on how they've been growing, or getting the space to like not even realize like, oh, I didn't know I was experiencing this. Like I've just been kind of running around and like I've been so busy with life.
Yeah.
I think it's giving that same care.
Yeah, that transitions us really well into talking about like the identity shift of motherhood and just so much change that happens in that period. You mentioned matricense specifically as a key topic. Do you want to define that for people who don't know what that is and kind of like how you support that season?
It's a newer term, but to help people understand it, we all know what adolescence is. It's that crazy time for teenagers going through puberty, experiencing just life in general. That's what matrescence is. So it's really a word to define like the full transition that happens as you're becoming a mom. The physical, psychological, neurological, and like relational changes that'll happen during that season are as profound as an adolescence, but there hasn't really been like a name for it. You're just told that you become a mom and that you wanted this. You asked for this. This is what you were hoping for. But there's so much change that happens within that. You lose complete control over your body. You become this secure base for this human who has to learn how to do everything in life. And while also like trying maintain relationships and take care of yourself physically and try to feel sane. Try to figure out who this new person is as like all the change is happening. And I think sometimes just giving people something to grab onto, like a name, can be grounding in a way of just allowing them to understand that they're not alone, allowing them to understand that like it's okay that they're going through this. It's okay that so much is happening for them. And I think too, it's longer than just postpartum. They say postpartum can be like 12 months. Adolescence isn't just 1 year. It is like this significant chunk of your life. And I want to give, this word is like meant to give that same care to moms.
Well, it's something I feel like that's not, it's not talked about as much. And there are some major seasons to it. Even the feeling of going to like, oh, I'm a mom of like little kids to like, oh, wait, now I'm a mom of big kids or a mom of teenagers or older kids outside of, empty nester. So yeah, I think there's so much, of identity shifting that goes on as a mom throughout that,
Yeah,
it's been so incredible. Like watching the literal brain transition that happens in that period. Most of my friends are like full-time, high-achieving healthcare practitioners, and watching them go from like it almost seems like a split second of their priorities changing. And I was that same way. I was like, oh, of course I'm gonna like work full-time and all the things, and having a baby and literally seeing like my brain chemistry transition, and now understanding what it is, having a word to kind of define that period has been helpful, because now when it happens to my friends, like I just tell them, I'm like, just wait, you're going to transition. And it's like what you said, it feels like out of body. You can't control it. It's happening anyways. And it feels so foreign to suddenly feel like you have like 3 degrees worth of new knowledge in a different body with a different brain that like now prioritizes different things, and to never have had a word for it prior seems kind of crazy.
I know. And it honestly really does. They talk about like phantom limbs. It's like it's like a phantom body. And you're just like supposed to like be okay because you wanted it, and like everything's supposed to like go back to normal, when in reality you have to create this entirely new normal. And like you lose pieces of your identity and have to like readjust them. You just like can feel so lost at sea. And it can feel invalidating to feel like, oh, but you wanted this. It's like, yeah, of course I did. But like now when my baby cries, or like I hear my son or daughter yell because they stubbed their toe, like there's a completely different experience because my brain has been wired totally differently overnight. It feels like.
We talked about this recently. My son was upset, and I told my husband, I was like, what are you feeling right now? And he was like, nothing. Like I can hear him crying in the other room. And I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, that must be so refreshing to not have a visceral experience in your stomach, making you feel like you're going to vom because you're like a genetic piece of you is being triggered by that sound. And I was like, wow, how lovely for fatherhood, right? But it's been such an interesting experience, like you're saying, to just say, like, I am different now. I am changed forever, regardless of if I want to be, but I'm physically changed. I'm physically different. I can't escape the body reaction that occurs from like my son being upset or when my son is hurt, right? Like my body reacts. It's not just my brain. It's not just like a mom thing. And so seeing that transition, I think this would be like such a good time for therapy, because I'm like, my husband and I are even more different. Like our genders are even more different to me than they've ever been, because the way that my body feels towards my child is very different than him for good reason, right?
Yeah. And I think too, like with the very general, like people think it's easier to talk about like their physical health over like their psychological, mental, and emotional experience. It's a lot easier to like talk about here's what I'm physically feeling. Here's what I notice. And on top of having that separation from your partner, you're just kind of like, not only can I is it a lot more difficult for them to understand what I'm experiencing physically, but also this entire this shifting and change of identity. Like you can feel even more alone in that, not because your partner's not necessarily trying, they could be trying to understand, but you're right, that gap I think just gets bigger because they're not going through the same thing with you. They haven't had the same rewiring, they haven't had the same physical changes, the emotional, the psychological changes.
Like they're going through it alongside you, but I think we experience.
But they literally can't experience
parenthood very differently than our husbands do.
Yeah.
Or partners.
Which is helpful so that if they're crying, they can be that support. So when you're nauseous or crawling out of your skin, it's okay, there can be a sense of balance. But when you're trying to walk through that experience and feel completely understood or completely seen, it can be hard, and even harder when your partner isn't walking through the same experience of parent.
How does the identity shift of new motherhood interact with the woman's attachment style and her relationship with her partner?
I think when you go back to when we were talking about major life transitions on top of just everything that's going on for the woman, I think a lot of the times what can happen is that they can go back to their default settings. So if you had done a lot of work before having kids and maybe in premarital counseling or just in individual counseling, and you felt like you had worked through all of the attachment style behaviors that I was exhibiting early in my relationship or in other relationships, I've worked through. And then you get to being a parent, you're running on no sleep. You are struggling to just get the basic needs met. If you're feeling disconnected from your partner, those behaviors can come back up. So with an anxious attachment, you can be very sensitive to changes in temperature within the relationship, which can be really helpful. But when sometimes you can be so highly sensitive to those changes, it could just be that your partner was tired or something else. You might think it's about the relationship and they're going to leave or they don't love you anymore or they don't care. And that can come up a lot. It can be oh, you didn't hold my hand when we were on the couch, or you haven't asked me how I'm doing today. It's do you still love me? It's and your partner can be of course, I still love you. I just was scrolling on my phone or doing something else. I go back to a lot of those, I say default settings, but a lot of those default settings can just come back up to the surface because you're in a survival mode. You're at your most raw and vulnerable. It's getting to look at the cracks in the foundation of your relationship and of you individually to see kind of where that growth can come and where that healing can continue.
I think that makes sense. As my child is an escalator, and so am I, which I haven't really talked about. I thought I was oh, I'm not an escalator anymore. I've done the work. I'm much better with my emotions. I'm so good at talking clearly through communication. But what I realized, very much what you're saying, is that when I'm sleepless, when I'm rushed, when I'm stressed, my default setting, it is still my first go-to. I escalate like no other. And my son in 3 is the best escalator, right? And we escalate each other. And so my husband, I told him, I'm wow, when I have no margin, I am still at the end of the day an escalator. I will always be. But when I'm in a safe environment and no one is escalating me, I'm totally good. I'm so fine. I'm so relatable, flex, no big deal. But as soon as another escalator comes along, and so it's taught me, I'm wow, I still have so much work to do, but I haven't been presented with these environments before. When you're in the unknown, what's the thing you cling to? Well, my survival skill is still to escalate.
Yeah. Yeah. We cling to what we feel most comfortable with and what we know, because at least it can give you, it might not give you a sense of control, but it gives you a sense of I would still say sense of control. It gives you something that in the sea of the unknown. In the sea of the unknown toddler, what reaction are they going to have? What are they going to experience? How do I learn how to react to that? Because again, in each different stage of childhood and each different stage of parenthood, these things are going to change and you're going to be continually having to readjust and adapt and learning as the cracks of the different stages come up. Because really what life is it's constant change, whether we like it or not, which most people don't. Even if it's good change, the experience of it is difficult. And how do we adjust to the cracks that come up? How do we nurture and heal the wounds that come up? How do we, when you asked, when we were talking about with our partner and having children, it's how do we relearn how to care for one another? How do we relearn how to have a marriage while also having children? How do we relearn how to connect with each other with the time that we now have, where we used to have all the time in the world after work or on the weekends? It's how do we find having a marriage? How do we find having a relationship? How do we find being an individual, being a person, and who even is that? How do we like want to parent, and how do we want to show up for them and have that relationship with them?
Yeah, I think those are super, super powerful like topics and tools that I could see counseling being really helpful for to avoid crisis later, to
Yeah.
avoid.
Or not to let things build up that,
Yeah.
tend to do it if that happens.
Yeah. I think too, it can be a space to help with awareness too. When you're in the moment and your kid is being an escalator and they're having a tantrum or they're screaming at you for something, it's hard to have that awareness in that moment of like, this is what's coming up for me and here's what I do. It might be learning, okay, like I'm at a 10 because my kid's at a 10. They're going to be okay if they keep screaming for a few more minutes. I need to go like decompress, or I'm going to react in a way that I don't want to react to my child or react to my friend or react to someone else. It can even be helpful in like providing the awareness of what does it feel like to be at a point where like I'm losing control of my emotions and I need to step back. I think that too is something that it's really helpful for on top of learning how to cope with those kinds of things.
I think that's probably like the area that would be the most powerful for like a lot of our listeners. Cause like, at least from my experience, like I know that I don't want to like yell or react to my child, but I also was never taught alternatives. Like being a daughter, right? And like having had parents, my parents had like very few of their own tools for parenting. And so I think a lot of us are like learning to parent from someone other than our parent. And that's been like really humbling to be like, oh, I actually don't really know any of my alternatives.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, like what you're surrounded by for so long kind of teaches you how to interact in the world. And then having kids, you're like, okay, so how do I want to do this? How do I want to like parent in a way? What kind of adult do I want to raise? Well, I don't really have any other tools to like do anything else. So I'm just going to either do what I've been taught or try a bunch of things and like hope it's different and almost like throw something against the wall and hope it sticks.
Yeah.
When therapy can give you a space to like explore all of those options and like find tools and things that can be most supportive in kind of being the type of person, the type of partner, parent, individual that you might want to be while allowing and giving space like for yourself to be authentically you.
I don't want to miss this because I feel like this is something key that we talked about earlier that you work with, but the perfectionism trap. How does perfectionism become a coping mechanism, and when does it start to hurt instead of help?
I think when it starts to hurt instead of help is when it becomes really something you feel like you're having to like run with and is very like shame based. I think that's when it becomes, I guess, like more maladaptive, because it can be helpful. It can be energizing. It can be motivating. But when it's stuck in criticism and shame and is really rigid, it's like, oh, I got an A- on my paper. Or I didn't get an A. The perfectionism that's supportive can be the one that is like, oh, well, I'm going to study harder, or like, I'm going to find more passion and it's going to motivate to like do better, versus it's the maladaptive perfectionism is the one that's going to tell you weren't enough, like you weren't good enough, you weren't working hard enough, like you should feel shame in how you performed, dragging you down.
I think it's nice to identify identify the difference, because I think sometimes like perfectionism is like always talked about in like a negative way, but as somebody who's a perfectionist, I would say that I have experienced like both sides of it. I've experienced being like it being fuel and it also being the thing that becomes like a deterrent.
Yeah. And so when it's the fuel, that's when it's supportive. It can be helpful. It wouldn't be something if it weren't there for a reason. I like what you said, when it's dragging you down, that's what we don't want. That's like where the work and like the internal work can be to help it become motivating again, because it can be a strength.
Yeah.
You work with women in this category, so who are like kind of dealing with a perfectionist trap. Is there, like, if you were to talk to that woman today, like before she was even in your office, are there some really effective tools that they can start with to like kind of loosen that grip on perfectionism on a day-to-day basis?
There's one tool that can come to mind at the moment. I think about something called the internal weather report. It's really kind of like having a self check-in. You can do it as often as you want during the day, but normally to start, I'd want women to start checking in with themselves 3 times a day. It's checking in to see like, is my jaw clenched? Are my shoulders up? What does my breathing feel like? And if it's my jaw's clenched, my shoulders are up, and like my breathing is shallow, what I'll want women to do is just to pause and just take like a big physiological sigh. You know, in yoga where they tell you to like breathe all the way in and have that very verbal like exhale. I'd want them to do that once and just try and release all of that and just be present with it. And if they need to do it again and do it a few times, then to do that a few times. But when you're experiencing those physical symptoms, it can feel like there's some sort of threat to your nervous system, and it can help to have them see that there's not an actual threat present, and that is something to start with.
Yeah, that's a super powerful tool to start with. Drea, do you want to move to the lightning round?
These are some quick answer questions that I think can be really insightful. So what is one thing high achieving women need to hear but rarely do?
I think it's okay for women to need people. It's not a weakness. It's not too much. It's just being human.
And then what's a therapy myth you want to retire?
Andrea, I liked what you said earlier that you don't have to be in crisis to go to therapy. You don't go to the dentist when your teeth are falling out. You go on a 6-month basis.
What do you personally do to regulate your own nervous system on a hard day?
I will go to my husband and have a 20-second hug. I will take a warm bath. And if I need to give myself a certain amount of time with my emotions, I will grab a journal or just sit in my bed and allow myself to just feel my feelings in a safe space.
What about therapy in one sentence, geared for the women who maybe might be like sitting on the fence about it?
It's the one place where you don't have to perform or be fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alix, for making this feel so accessible and safe. We think a lot of women listening just recognize themselves in this conversation, and that matters. So we're so glad you're here. Can you tell us where our listeners can find you?
You can find me on Instagram at ARW Counseling. My website's the same, arwcounseling.com, or you can send me an email at arwcounseling@gmail.com.
And then do you see patients only in Texas? What is the guidelines for availability?
Yes. So I'm only licensed in the state of Texas. So I can see clients throughout the entire state of Texas. But that's where my
you're
limits
currently
lie.
accepting patients?
I'm currently accepting, individuals and couples. Yeah.
One last question. What's the youngest that you see?
The youngest that I see is 13.
Okay.
Yeah. So 13 and up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alix.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was awesome.